Y'all know I love some alliteration, so we get it with rinse, repeat, or retreat. Also, I have no idea how to spell alliteration. I won't apologize for that, though, because the word phonetically isn't spelled phonetically. So what chance do any of us actually have on being able to spell anything? That's just my deep dive. Rinse, repeat, or retreat. This is what we're going to do. One division per week. We're going to go through all 32 teams over the next couple of months, and we're going to figure out, are the teams better, worse, or the same from a year ago? So our tone going into last season versus our tone going into this season. And we're going to start with the NFC East. Now, Commanders fans, brace yourself because it might get brutal here in a second. But first, because we care about ratings, we start with Cowboys. Everybody starts with Cowboys when they talk about the NFC East. They were 7-10 in 2024. And the question is, do we feel rinse, repeat, or retreat? Do we feel like they're better, the worse, or the same than they were a year ago? Let's remember, though, Jori, 7-10 last year was a staggering disappointment for the Cowboys. So, I feel like a year ago right now, most people thought the Cowboys were at least still going to be a viable contending football team. So 7-10, the wheels fell off. But a year ago, our conversation was pretty positive about most of what the Cowboys were doing. So where are we on this one?
Yeah, I don't think the Cowboys have more optimism than a year ago. I think if you ask Cowboys fans, they certainly don't. I think if you're looking for reasons for optimism, it would be that the Cowboys have always been a better team, especially in the last 10, 15 years when their offensive line has had a clear plan and clear investment in it. And they did that with the draft, and they did that in hiring offensive coordinator Clayton Adams from an offensive line background. And so I think that plus Dak Prescott staying healthy, Micah Parsons staying healthy. Again, last year you had major injuries to Dak, to Micah Parsons, to DeMarcus Lawrence, who's no longer on the team. All of those will be key. But still, you have to ask yourself, well, the defense had a lot of change last year. Trayvon Diggs isn't going to be ready right away. Jerry Jones kind of alluded to that after the draft. So do you have the guys on defense for Matt Eberflus to take that defense to the level? And well, offensively, even with Dak at the beginning of the year last year, they went 3-5. So that wasn't ideal. And oh, by the way, it's hard for any quarterback if you don't have a run game. And they really didn't invest significantly in the running back position. Now, maybe they're hoping that the offensive line upgrades will help the run game. But I think that you really have to ask yourself, if you can't run the ball in the NFC East, what are you going to do to try and keep Saquon Barkley off the field? What are you going to do to try and slow down Jaden Daniels? You need to be able to control the clock in that division.
I think we've kind of overlooked the Cowboys' ability to rebound. They had one bad year. And because it's the Cowboys, we all think it's the end of the world. We overreact to the Cowboys, right? But look, me and you, Fitz, what were we saying a year ago? They've won 12 straight games 3 years in a row. That's not easy in the NFL. They had a terrible year last year. We all underrated the loss of Dan Quinn, their defensive coordinator. Mike Zimmer just wasn't the right fit. Their defense collapsed. Injuries had a big part in that. I don't see why their defense can't rebound to a normal level. And Dak healthy again. The offensive line should be very good in front of him. They're still trying to get this number 2 receiver situation figured out. They'll have CeeDee Lamb back. I don't see why the Cowboys can't rebound, maybe not to a 12-win level, but to be pretty good. They had a bad year. That happens all the time in the NFL. They dealt with a lot of weird injuries, but they were competitive in the second half of the season. They actually, everybody thinks well, they had a bad year because Dak got hurt. Well, they were pretty competitive without Dak. And I think that getting Dak back and healthy, I don't see any reason why the Cowboys can't be a playoff contender again. We'll see. Brian Schottenheimer has a lot to prove.
What about the division getting tougher?
I don't know that it has. And we'll get to the other teams in the division.
Ooh,
but I don't see this. I don't see this division.
A year ago to now, you don't think the Commanders are more of a threat than they were? You don't think the Eagles winning the Super Bowl? Remember, the NFC East, which everyone thought was going to be a disaster last year, had both teams in the NFC Championship. So how is it not tougher than a year ago?
We're going to talk about the Commanders in a second. My Commanders might no longer be my Commanders. Look, the Eagles are great. Don't get me wrong. The Eagles are great. The Giants are not going to be good. I think the Commanders take a step back, and why can't the Cowboys get back into that mix to be the second best team in the NFC East? I'm not putting them ahead of the Eagles. Don't get me wrong here. But why can't they be a playoff contender again? Again, they had a bad year. Everybody saw that. But I think we're just totally overlooking the ability for the Cowboys to go back to those levels of those 3 straight years when they were winning 12 games.
The only thing I'd say about the Cowboys, I'm in retreat in this rinse, repeat, retreat. I'm in retreat because a year ago I was like, hey, they always win 12 games. They're going to win 12 games again. We saw so many cracks in the armor. It sort of fell apart last year. I don't think they're a 7-10 team, but I don't think they're a 12-win team either. So a year ago, I thought they were still going to be very good. Now I think they're okay, and they're trying to build their way up. They feel like a 9 or 10 win football team. So let's get to the Commanders, though, because you mentioned, by the way, the win total on the Cowboys right now, BetMGM has them at 7.5. Rise. I keep saying rinse. I said, I can't read. This is don't just
I
point
will
this out to
say,
me.
forget whether you can spell alliteration. The fact that you said the rise, rinse, repeat thing without any stumbling was impressive.
Thank you. But I don't know why I keep saying rinse, repeat, because shampoo, I guess. Apparently I can't read. Rise, repeat, or retreat. And then we'll just, Stone, I'll just give you that again so that you can just replace it anywhere. Rise, repeat, and retreat. See, I can't even read. Okay. So 7.5 is the win total on the Cowboys this year. So obviously down big from last year. The Commanders, next up in this, 12-5 last year. Their current win total, 9.5. Okay. And so I know, Jori, you talked to Jaden Daniels. I want to get into that. Let's start there. Let's start with Jaden Daniels because Frank's got some heat, Commanders fans, that I want you to have the good before the bad. So give me the sort of the sense of Jaden Daniels and your conversation with him yesterday.
I think what was interesting to me about Jaden Daniels was the way he's approaching this offseason. We often say, how does a quarterback go from rookie quarterback who has a strong year to avoiding a sophomore slump? Again, CJ Stroud a year ago, we saw it was a tough year for him, takes like 15 more sacks than he had his rookie year. I think it was 38 to 52, so maybe it was 14 if we're getting really technical. All of these different issues. And I think Jaden Daniels, when I asked him, hey, what are you working on this year before even getting into the sophomore slump question, he said he was watching his film, identifying his tendencies, and working with his private quarterback's coach to try and ensure he didn't have some of those tells that he had his rookie year. And I thought that was super bright. Obviously, we know Jaden's work ethic. We know how early he's getting to the building, all of that. On the other hand, I talked to him about why Cliff Kingsbury was so effective in helping him transition from the college game to the pro game. And a big thing was he said, Cliff was really intentional about putting in plays that I was comfortable with. And he said there was a time during the game week prep that he goes to Cliff's office and he says, hey, I'm not comfortable with this play. And Cliff's like, I don't know. I think we should really put it in. And Jaden's like, I'm just letting you know I'm not comfortable running this play. The rest of the game playbook for this week, I'm good. This one, I'm not. They try it one time in the game. It doesn't work. And Cliff's like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to try it again this game. And I think, to me, not every team has a culture where the rookie quarterback feels like they can go in and say that, especially because it sounded like this was early in the season. So they hadn't made it to the NFC Championship game by this point. And so I think that to be able to retain Cliff Kingsbury for a second year when most teams that had the success that Washington had last year would have lost their offensive coordinator and play caller, and to be able to say, hey, this is a quarterback who understands what he did last year and understands that people are going to come up with new ways to thwart it. And oh, by the way, they've invested more in the offensive line last year, when last year they were kind of over exceeding expectations with a bunch of like older guys like Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner who kind of overperformed. I understand the expectations are so much higher this year, and I understand that is going to be a challenge. I also think that if you talk to Jaden Daniels and see how even-keeled he is, he's not the type of guy who's going to be fazed by that.
Look, I have all love in the world for Jaden Daniels. I think he's awesome. I think he's great. And let's not forget, a year ago, there was nobody more optimistic about the Washington Commanders than me. I was telling everybody, this is a playoff team. This team could go big time places. But I look back now and I have to say, I think this team is going to retreat. There were so many things about their season that are just unrepeatable. Now, some of these things are from Warren Sharp, does a great job over at sharpfootball.com. The analysis, listening to him and a lot of stuff he says. So I'm going to repeat some of his talking points that I had already seen doing some work on my previews. Last year, the Washington Commanders on fourth down were 87%. The highest rate in NFL history. That is not going to repeat. Last year, they played 12 teams that didn't make the playoffs, the most in the NFL. They won 11 of those games. And think about some of those wins. The Hail Mary over the Bears. And the win they had against the Eagles, very impressive, but Devontae Smith drops a third down pass that basically allows Jaden Daniels to win the game in the final 15 seconds. Games like that, they played all year, where they were just winning right at the end of games, the Atlanta game in overtime. Just time after time, the Commanders were winning these awesome games, and that's not repeatable. It's just not. They are going to take a step back from where they were a year ago. Jaden Daniels, look, we were saying the same thing about CJ Stroud last year. Well, the Texans aren't going to retreat because CJ Stroud's so awesome. CJ Stroud's still awesome. Just a lot of things around him kind of crumbled a little bit because we like to think of improvement as linear. We like to think, wow, the Commanders were this good at Jaden Daniels' rookie year, so they're going to be even better in his second year, and they might be because Jaden Daniels is just that dude. that usually doesn't happen. There's something called the plexiglass principle, where a team improves so much in one year that it's almost inevitable that they take a step back the year after, because it's just, that's the way it goes. And there's so many luck-based things in the Commanders' profile that just can't repeat in 2025. I think this team is on the right path. I think they're going to be very, very good, but they are going to take a step back this year. I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs this year. 9.5 wins, I'd go under that. This is nothing against Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, or anything, but I think this was always a multi-year thing with the Commanders, and it would not surprise me whatsoever to see them take a step back from what was a very awesome, exciting, but at the same time fortunate 2024 season.
See, Frank, I think what's interesting about what you're saying is when you start talking about these teams who overperform in that first year with a head coach and also are winning all these close games at the end, I think back to Brian Daboll's first year with the New York Giants and what a leap they took in 2022 and then how they backslid and have yet to get back to where they were that one year when they won a playoff game. To me, the difference is our question is not will they win more games, it's do you feel better about the Commanders than a year ago? I definitely feel better about them than a year ago because I was concerned, hey, do they have the right vibes? I visited OTAs last year. I kind of felt like they were almost too chill to have success. Turns out it worked for everyone involved. To me, the question is not, they might lose more games because, like you said, they're probably not going to have Hail Marys to win, and they're not going to have cornerbacks who turn to the crowd while they're throwing that ball and all of those different things. But do I feel like if you put them against the Eagles in the playoffs this year, maybe they could be better than last year? Yes. And so I'd be surprised if they don't make the playoffs at all. I think maybe it's not quite as a lock and maybe they're not securing their bid in November in the way they were last year. But I do think that they have a foundation they didn't have last year. And I don't think the magic has totally run out. I think that they'll lose some more games, but I think that the foundation will be sturdier.
That's where two things can be true. Like, I think part of this is that Frank last year was so high on the Commanders that it's possible, Frank, because to give you credit, as tough as this is, Frank, I don't like to give you too much credit, but to give you credit, you were the one that was screaming from the mountaintop over and over and over again that Washington was better than we all thought. You were really high on Washington this year. So even if you're just somewhat high on Washington this year, that would be a bit of a, that's a bit of a step back for you, right? So
right.
For me,
9-8 would be a big step back for them. And 9.5 is their win total. And if I take under it, they're 8-9, 9-8. I think everybody's going to freak out and say, oh my goodness, this is, like you talked about, Jori, this is Daboll's second year. Now they're good. No, this is the natural progression. This is a multi-year thing with the Commanders. They're on the right path, but I think they're going to regress this year.
But if they go 9-8 for me this year, that would still be a rise from what I expected last year. I thought last year they would be better and they'd be like a 6 or 7 win team and Jaden looks really good, right? Like it turns out that they were a 12 win team. I was wildly wrong about Washington. So this year, I think, they're a 9 wins. So for me, I actually feel better today about Washington than I did a year ago, but I think their result on the field is going to take a little step back from where it was a year ago. So like, I feel better. That would make them rise, but also from a record standpoint, I'd be willing to retreat, like all at once. I'm not sure I can have both. What about the Giants, by the way? Can we, like, the Giants sucked today. The Giants I thought were going to suck a year. Like, I'm repeat for the Giants. Let me just say, like, I thought the Giants were bad. I think the Giants are bad. The Giants are bad. Well, Jori, where are you on the Giants?
Yeah, I'll go repeat also. I know maybe it'd be better show if I went something else. I don't think they're going to be significantly worse. I think Russell Wilson will be fine. I think that Malik Neighbors will have some spectacular plays. I think their defensive line is going to be a problem. Once Abdul Carter's healthy enough to return and you add him to the guys already on that line with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, all of that crew, I think that that's going to be a problem. But I still feel like they're just missing some pieces. And I also don't trust that leadership to be able to keep it calm. I mean, we've heard stories after Wink Martindale was no longer their defensive coordinator about him clashing with Brian Daboll. And I don't think he's the only one who's clashed with Brian Daboll. And I think at some point, if you have a head coach who is as combustible as Brian Daboll has shown to be at certain moments in his career, I think it's really challenging when you're not winning. Now, if you're winning and you have that energy, people view it as fiery and they love it and he's all mad and it's energizing the team. But when you're losing, it becomes a problem real quick.
I think I'm going to go rise-ish. I'm not expecting the Giants to be playoff contenders or anything. I made it up. It's fine.
Frank can add an ish to anything. He's a writer.
I just think that I think the Giants were just so bad last year. But you look at they had a good offseason. I really believe that. Adding an Abdul Carter, some of their additions in free agency, I thought were really big. Their defensive line is going to be nasty. I don't think their quarterback situation is any good, but it was even worse last year. So I think this team, by the end of the year, I think we're going to see Jackson Dart. I think that's inevitable. For all the talk about him sitting all year, that ain't going to happen. It just doesn't happen with a bad team that needs to show some signs of hope by the end of the year. So I think we're going to see some things from Jackson Dart at the end of the year that give us a little bit of hope. I still think this is the last place team in the NFC East, but I do think they're on the right path. I think they're on a better path than they were last year when they lost Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley and didn't seem to know what the heck they were doing. I do like the additions they made this offseason. I do think they are getting on the right path. It's going to take some time to get there, but I think that they're going to be better off than they were a year ago.
Yeah, I just think you're right. They're going to win, in my mind, 5 or 6 games. Like that 5.5 is their win total. I think 6, I could see 6 and 11 for sure. But I still think they're the last place team clearly in their division, which is what I thought a year ago. So that's why I go repeat. What about the Eagles? The cream of the crop of the entire NFL, went 14-3 last year. I think most people expected the Eagles to be pretty good last year, but they were great. And their win total right now is 11.5 at BetMGM. So where are you on this one, Frank? Are you at rise, repeat, or retreat for Philly?
I think a little, I want to say retreat, but then I'm going to have all the Eagles fans mad at me. So I'll just say repeat. But they did lose a lot of talent in free agency this offseason. Let's not get that twisted. Like, I mean, everybody's like, oh, how he's done so well drafting the past few years. I get that. I do. They can absorb these losses better than anybody else, but they did lose some dudes, like some serious talent. And that's not nothing. And can you recapture everything that happens after a Super Bowl? It's hard. Super Bowl hangover is a Super Bowl hangover for a reason. It's a thing. You play a lot of football games. All of a sudden you're dealing with being front runners instead of, the team chasing. We didn't talk much about I said over and over and over last season, why are we not talking more about the Eagles? They haven't lost a game since September.
Yeah, you're right.
And they just ran the table except that one game against Jaden Daniels. And by the end of the season, everybody's like, oh yeah, this was an all-time great team. We weren't treating them that way in December. We were still a little bit skeptical about the Eagles. They're in a different position now, different expectations. Defensive improvement is not sticky from one year to another often. They had a great young defense last year, but there's no guarantee they're going to be the best defense of football again. They might take a little bit of a step back there. And just a lot of these things add up to the Eagles being a little off of what they were last year, which was a team that lost one time after September. They were great. They were awesome. So it's almost inevitable they retreat a little bit, but they're still going to be great. They're still going to be a Super Bowl contender. So I'll just stick with repeat, but acknowledging that it's hard to duplicate what they did last season.
Yeah, the Eagles will retreat relative to the season because you can't, I guess they could repeat.
How could you get better?
That
was awesome.
But if the question is from a year ago to now, do we feel better? Yeah, absolutely. A year ago, I wondered if Saquon Barkley could stay healthy and have the impact, and could he really do with the offensive line what we thought? I wondered if the offensive line without Jason Kelce was going to be able to do it. I wondered if Jalen Hurts had what it took to be a quarterback that took his team over the edge, and I wondered if Vic Fangio defensively was able to get the team where he wanted when, by the way, the Miami Dolphins did not have a good experience with Vic Fangio in the year prior. And so I think it would be hard for me to say that versus a year ago. I don't feel significantly better about the Eagles. That said, when you look at what actually happened in the season, they hit such a peak that the likelihood is they will retreat. I think they'll make the playoffs again. I think even if they have a little bit of a slump at the beginning, I do think this Eagles team had a bit of a strategy last year that was working. I think, to me, the biggest question is, Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator last year. Now he's the New Orleans Saints head coach. How is Kevin Patullo going to do as offensive coordinator? How much time is it going to take for him and Jalen Hurts to get on the same page? How much time is it going to take for Nick Sirianni to be on the same page as them? Because a couple years ago, we did see when Brian Johnson was the offensive coordinator that there were just too many cooks in the kitchen at some point with him and Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And so I think you have to say, can the Eagles continue to say Saquon is the way to win? Can Saquon hold up from a health standpoint? But yeah, a year ago we were talking about Nick Sirianni's job. And so I don't think you can say that we feel worse about it now when clearly the man won a Super Bowl. So his job is safer than it was a year ago.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I'm actually rise on the Eagles from where I was a year ago. Because a year ago right now, I thought, yeah, this is one of the better teams. They're going to be a playoff team. Now I look at it and it's like, man, I don't know. When you replace the offensive line pieces that they replaced going into last season with such little drop off, and you show that you continue to have the ability to Philly, you brotherly shove your way to every first down that you want, like nothing stops this. And like it became even more dominant, even without Kelce in the middle, like all the little things that last year gave me hesitation of, well, let's see. I mean, they answered every one of those questions. So now I'm in the spot where I've risen to my, like, while I agree with both of you that the results, will they go 14-3? I think 14-3 is such a special year in the NFL. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they win 12 games, right? But if we're talking about, hey, make the short list of teams that you'd be willing to bet on to win the Super Bowl, the Eagles are in that. So for me, I'm actually rise to where I was a year ago and tip of the cap at this point. But I think Jori makes the most important point in my mind that you're going to continue to hear from us over and over and over again through all of these teams. Coordinator changes matter, and we've seen coordinator changes really hurt the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think it's fair for everybody to step back. We've seen it be a huge benefit and a huge loss for them. So I think it's fair to step back with a little bit of hesitation.